So when I originally started reading this book, I really had no intentions of making a video talking about it, but it wasn't until I finished it and then read the afterword in this book that I was like, I should talk about this book, because reading it, it was so good. It's a pretty short story. I think the historical context too of this is also very important. So, but we'll get to that in a minute. But I couldn't help it. Once I finished this book, I knew I had to talk about it, and that is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpmans. There's the afterword by Sophie Mackintosh, which we're also going to talk about, which partially inspired me to talk about this in general. And just fair warning, I will be talking about the book, so there will probably be spoilers. So if you haven't read it, or if you have intentions to read it and don't want it spoiled to you, don't watch this video probably, because it will probably give some stuff away about the plot of the book. So just letting you know. But the basic premise of this book is that you start off following this one young character who her and about 39 other women are in a underground like bunker cage thing, and they're watched by guards, but they also have no memory of like how they got there. They don't really fully remember their previous life. Like they remember bits of it, but like it's kind of foggy. And then one day something happens and they manage to escape and get out, but there's kind of this like, they get out of the bunker and they kind of are out in this weird world that they don't fully remember, and they don't know where they are, and they're looking around and it's like they don't know what to do. Even though they have freedom now, it's like, what do we do? Where do we go? And the main character, who's the narrator of the book, she's only ever grown up in that world of being in this underground bunker, not really knowing anybody except for the women that she's imprisoned with. They're not allowed to talk to the guards, and they're really too scared to do anything because they're not sure what the guards will do to them. And this is kind of where the spoilers start to come in. But so the group of women, once they escape, they start walking around in this unfamiliar world where they don't even know if they're like, are we on Earth? Are we somewhere else? Like it just was so unfamiliar to all of them. And they start walking because they're like, okay, maybe if we just walk in any direction, like we'll find something, we'll find civilization, we'll find something that gives us answers to the life we've been living for years. They start walking and they find other bunkers with people imprisoned, and they slowly kind of find out that they weren't the only ones imprisoned, and it was all about 40-ish people in all of these bunkers, so they were all in like very similar situations. And at first they only find women, so they're like, okay, so they're only imprisoning the women, and eventually they find some imprisoned men, which is also kind of an interesting twist that I didn't really see coming. But eventually the kind of heaviness of just finding these people who weren't as lucky as they were to escape were just kind of left for dead. It was too heavy for them, so they kind of just settled in one area, just kind of survived off the land until pretty much each one of them dies. And then the narrator, who is the youngest of all of them, is the last living, and once everybody else dies, she decides she's going to go back out and try to find answers. And while she doesn't really find an answer in the end, like she discovers something else, which I won't talk about, but she discovers something else, other things that kind of, it doesn't really answer anything, but it gives her more questions as to, or thoughts. It's more thought-provoking, I feel like, the things that she kind of discovers. And eventually she kind of settles somewhere else and wanted to kind of die in a more, I guess, respectable manner or whatever. So, but while the book kind of ended with not any clear answers as to the purpose of them being imprisoned or anything like that, it still is such a satisfying read. And I think this is where, in my opinion, the afterword of this book really makes you think about the historical context of this book. So I'll talk about that. So on the back too, it says Jacqueline Harpmans, the author of the book, was born in Belgium, and her family fled to Casablanca with her family during World War II. So part of what the imprisonment of these women and the author's personal story is just kind of so perfectly kind of ties together. It's almost like an echo, like a sci-fi sort of way of looking at what she went through. This is what Sophie Mackintosh says in the afterword of this book. She says, the approach to death, to suffering, makes it difficult to analyze such a novel without acknowledging that the author, Jacqueline Harpmans, was Jewish, having fled to Casablanca with her family during the Second World War. There are echoes of concentration camps and the senseless cruelty of their confinement, the endless cracking of the whips of the mysterious prison guards, the sickening inevitability as they discover over and over that everyone else on the planet imprisoned in the same way as them has perished. And for what? A project with a vague beginning, the confusion the women allude to, sirens and fire and being taken from their homes, and then nothing but an endless, pointless confinement. And that to me was like a perfect summary of like the echoing of what Jacqueline Harpmans sort of went through or experienced in a way, even though she personally wasn't in a concentration camp. Seeing other people like her who were imprisoned and killed for really no reason other than just like pure hatred. And I think that's why this book, like I saw somebody on Fable, after I reviewed this, they also reviewed it, and they said because there's no answers at the end that it was an unsatisfying read. And I was like, see, to me the answer is in the not knowing, because it's like, well, yeah, there's the historical context behind it. It kind of holds up a mirror to what's really happening in that historical context. And I think that's why this is such a good book, because it's a sci-fi version of kind of the telling of what people went through in the Holocaust, and or other people who like Jacqueline Harpman, who survived, who was able to flee her country from persecution. I think that's what makes this book so good. There is no ending. There is no satisfying end to this book, because you don't know the answers. You don't know why they were in prison. And that's kind of, I feel like, while we know why people were, in prison and concentration camps, it was just hatred. It was really pointless. It's just pointless. It's like, what was that for? And then the people on the other end, like the main character, she is left on her own. She has nobody to talk to, nothing. Like, she has nothing. She has no answers. She doesn't have the people she was with originally. She's just left in nothingness. So I think of like Anne Frank, when her, all of her family was put in Auschwitz, and her dad was, I think, the sole survivor of her family, and he was just left with nothing. His family was all dead. And it's like, for what? To me, this is just a perfect echoing of history, and unfortunately a little bit of echoing of what unfortunate futures we may make for ourselves. So I think this is a great book. It should be taught in schools, especially within the context of the Holocaust, but also human on human suffering, genocide, things like that. Just pointless things that really just amount to nothing. It's just hatred being exercised on other humans. So this is a great book. I highly recommend it. 10 out of 10. That was my rating on Fable, was 10 out of 10, no notes, because this is such a good book. I think, like I said, by feeling like the ending is unsatisfying, like that one reviewer that I was talking about, I'm like, this isn't like this isn't like the Hunger Games where there's a satisfying ending, Katniss wins and all that. It's not about that. That's the thing. It's not about there being a hero, or it's about just unrelenting hatred, and how that, or prejudice, or whatever it may be, just is like such a futile exercise. Yeah, I don't know how to explain it. I feel like if you read it, you'll understand what I'm trying to say. But it is such a good book. So let me know what you guys thought in the comments, and thanks for watching this video. So I'll see you next time. Bye.